The music was soft, people were laughing, and lights shimmered off the crystal glasses. I was proud that night. After years of hard work, I had finally earned respect at my job. My boss, Margaret Collins, had even congratulated me earlier for closing a big deal. For once, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. Then I saw Ethan walk in. I froze. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't part of the company, but somehow, he always managed to show up where he didn't belong. He walked in like he owned the place, smiling that same careless smile I'd known since childhood. A few coworkers glanced his way, confused but polite. I tried to ignore him and hoped he would just leave. But he didn't. He walked straight toward me, holding a drink. His eyes were sharp, his steps unsteady. I could smell the alcohol before he even spoke. "So, this is where you play perfect?" he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. My stomach tightened. I tried to calm him down, whispering, "Ethan, not here. Let's talk outside." He laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that made anyone else smile. It was bitter, cutting. "Outside? No, let's talk right here, Lena. You think you're better than me now?" Heads began to turn. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes. Margaret was watching from across the room, her face unreadable. I tried again, quietly begging him to lower his voice, but Ethan stepped closer. "You're a liar," he said. "You lied to everyone about who you really are." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but before I could say a word, he lifted his glass and threw the drink right into my face. The cold liquid hit my skin, ran down my neck, soaked into my dress. The room went completely silent. Someone gasped. I couldn't move. My hands shook as I blinked away the wine stinging my eyes. Ethan just stood there, breathing heavily, like he had proven something. I heard Margaret's heels crossing the floor. She came up beside me and put her hand on my arm. Her voice was calm, steady. "Come with me," she said softly. I didn't look back at Ethan. I didn't have the strength. Margaret led me out of the ballroom, her hand still on my shoulder. The hallway was quiet, and I could finally breathe again. I wanted to scream, cry, or disappear. Anything but stand there covered in wine and shame. Margaret didn't say much. She just handed me a napkin and said, "Don't let this moment define you." Her words were firm but kind. I nodded, unable to speak. That night, as I rode home, my reflection in the car window looked unfamiliar. My heart was broken, not just from the humiliation, but from realizing how far Ethan had fallen. I didn't know it then, but that moment would be the last time he would ever have power over me. When I was a kid, our house was small but full of noise. My dad, Mark, used to say that family was all that really mattered. He worked long hours at a local repair shop, and my mom, Diane, stayed home to take care of us. But when I was 13, my dad died suddenly from a heart attack. Everything changed after that. Mom fell apart in her own quiet way. She stopped cooking, stopped smiling, and spent most days sitting in front of the window like she was waiting for him to walk back in. That left me to grow up faster than I should have. I started working after school, first at a grocery store, then later at a diner on weekends. I used my money to pay bills, buy groceries, and keep the lights on. Ethan was older by 3 years. Everyone thought he'd step up, but he didn't. He was always charming, always had a reason why he couldn't keep a job. He'd say, "I've got something better coming," but it never came. He'd disappear for a few weeks, then show up asking Mom for money. When she didn't have any, he'd come to me. Sometimes I gave it to him, because I felt guilty for saying no. Sometimes I just wanted peace. Over the years, that guilt became a habit. Ethan blamed me for everything, for Dad dying, for Mom struggling, for him not being able to find himself. He once told me, "You always make me look bad, Lena." I remember standing there thinking, I wasn't trying to. I was just trying to survive. When I finally got a steady job and started doing well, he suddenly came back into my life with new energy. He told me he'd started a small construction company and just needed a little help to get it off the ground. He said, "This time's differently. I've changed." He looked sincere, and for a moment, I wanted to believe him. Mom was proud of him, too. She told me, "Your brother's finally doing something right. You should be happy for him." And I really was. I wanted him to win, to finally stop being angry at the world. A few weeks later, Ethan told me he needed an investor. He said, "You know people, Lena. Maybe your boss could help. I just need one chance." I hesitated, but I'd spent so many years wishing for a normal relationship with him that I convinced myself it was worth the risk. Margaret, my boss, trusted me. She always said she believed in helping people who worked hard, and Ethan could be very convincing when he wanted to be. So, I set up a meeting between them. I introduced him to Margaret, told her he was reliable, motivated, and ready to build something real. She agreed to meet him, and that night, I remember feeling proud, like maybe I'd finally helped fix the cracks in our family. I didn't know then that I was setting the stage for everything to fall apart. After I introduced Ethan to Margaret, everything moved fast. He showed up to the meeting dressed sharp, with his usual easy smile and confident work. He talked about his company, Parker builds, like it was already a success. He brought drawings, contracts, and a few glossy photos of houses he claimed his team had worked on. I could see Margaret was impressed, but I knew she trusted my word more than his presentation. When she asked if he was reliable, I told her yes. I said he was serious about changing his life. Margaret decided to invest. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough to give his business a real start. She handed over an advance payment, and I could tell she was doing it partly because she wanted to help me. She told me afterward, "I believe in second chances. If your brother works as hard as you do, he'll be fine." I smiled, grateful and hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I thought maybe Ethan and I could both move forward. For a few weeks, everything seemed fine. Ethan sent me messages saying things were going great. He told me he'd landed a few clients, and I believed him. He even dropped off flowers for Mom, telling her that soon she wouldn't have to worry about bills anymore. It felt too good to be true, and deep down I think I knew it was. Then one morning, Margaret called me into her office. Her tone was calm, but her face said otherwise. She asked if I had heard from Ethan. I told her I hadn't in a few days. She sighed and handed me a file. Inside were bounced checks, missing invoices, and unanswered email. "He's not returning my calls," she said. My stomach sank. I called Ethan right away, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Nothing. By the end of that week, Margaret had realized what happened. Ethan had taken the money and disappeared. The contracts he showed her were fake, and the company didn't even have a proper license. He'd lied about everything. I felt like the floor had dropped from under me. I couldn't sleep or eat. All I could think about was how I had vouched for him. When word got around the office, things got worse. People stopped looking me in the eye. I could hear the whispers. "She had to know," someone said once as I walked by. Maybe they planned it together. It made me sick to my stomach. I tried to explain, but nobody believed me. Margaret didn't yell or fire me. She just looked at me with quiet disappointment, and that hurt even more. I sent Ethan dozens of messages begging him to make things right, but he never replied. Weeks turned into months. Then, on the night of the company gala, I saw his name pop up on my phone for the first time since he disappeared. I didn't know it then, but that call would lead to the moment that changed everything. When I walked into the gala that night, I was nervous but determined. It was my first time facing everyone since Ethan had vanished with Margaret's money. The whispers had quieted a bit, but I still felt eyes on me wherever I went. I told myself to stay calm, smile, and just make it through the night. Margaret had encouraged me to come, saying it would show strength. I trusted her judgment. The ballroom looked beautiful, soft lights, elegant decorations, and laughter echoing through the air. I was talking to a coworker near the buffet when I saw him. Ethan. He was standing by the bar, dressed in a wrinkled suit, drink already in his hand. My heart dropped. I hadn't seen him in months. For a second, I thought I was imagining him. Then he caught my eye and smirked. I felt my throat tighten. Part of me wanted to run, but another part of me needed answers. I walked over slowly, hoping no one else noticed. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He shrugged, swaying slightly. "I came to talk. You ruined everything for me, Lena." I blinked, confused. "I ruined it? You took the money and disappeared. Do you have any idea what you did to my job?" "To me." My voice trembled. I wasn't trying to make a scene, but I could feel people beginning to glance in our direction. Ethan laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Oh, right. Poor, innocent Lena. Always the victim. You think you're better than me now, don't you? Got your fancy job, your perfect boss, your new life." I took a deep breath. "This isn't about me being better, Ethan. You need to fix this. Talk to Margaret, give her back what's left, and maybe we can." He cut me off, voice rising. "Fix it? You think I can fix it? You and your boss made sure I lost everything. You used me to look good." His words came out louder and louder. The room started to quiet down. People stopped talking. I could feel their attention shifting toward us. My hands shook. "Ethan, please lower your voice," I whispered, but he didn't. He looked right at me, eyes filled with anger. "You're a liar," he shouted. "You used me to climb the ladder, and now you're pretending you're some kind of saint." Before I could move, he raised his glass, and in one sharp motion, threw the red wine straight at my face. The liquid splashed across my skin and dress. The shock made everything silent. I couldn't hear the music anymore, couldn't even breathe. My eyes burned, my cheeks stung, and my body went cold. For a long second, no one moved. Then I felt a gentle hand on my arm. Margaret was there. Her expression was calm, controlled. She didn't look at Ethan. She just said softly, "Come with me." I followed her out of the ballroom, my heels clicking on the floor. In the hallway, she handed me a napkin and looked me straight in the eye. "Don't cry," she said firmly. "This isn't over." And somehow I believed her. After the gala, Ethan disappeared again. No one saw him leave, and I didn't hear from him afterward. The next few days at work were unbearable. I avoided looking anyone in the eye. Every time someone whispered or laughed, I assumed it was about me. My hands shook whenever my phone buzzed, thinking it might be a message from Ethan, but it never was. I expected to be fired. Honestly, I would have understood if Margaret wanted nothing to do with me. She had every reason to. He had stolen from her, and I was the one who had brought him into her life. I spent a whole weekend waiting for an email or a call telling me to clear out my desk. But on Monday morning, something unexpected happened. Margaret called me into her office. Her tone was calm, not cold, but serious. I took a seat, trying to hold myself together. She looked at me for a moment and then said, "I've dealt with men like your brother my entire career. They lie, they charm, and they always think they're too smart to get caught." I didn't know what to say. I just stared at my hands, ashamed. Then she added, "I want to help you, not punish you." Those words caught me off guard. I looked up and she gave me a small, knowing smile. "He thinks he got away with it," she said. "But we're not done yet." Margaret was a woman who built her success by paying attention to detail. She told me to bring her everything I still had from Ethan, his proposals, his messages, even his printed contracts. We spent hours in her office going through them. She saw things I'd never noticed: mismatched dates, reused company names, invoices with addresses that didn't exist. A few days later, she brought in a friend of hers, a retired business investigator named Paul. He'd helped her before on fraud cases. He was quiet but sharp, the kind of man who could find a lie just by reading a sentence twice. Together, they started piecing things together. They found that Ethan's company had no legal registration. The buildings he claimed to work on didn't belong to his company at all. He had copied photos from real construction projects online and used them as his own. The so-called partners he mentioned were actually small contractors he never paid. Margaret shook her head and said, "He's not just reckless. He's a con artist." I felt sick. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right there. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had built his life on lies. Every deal, every promise, every story he told me was part of his game. Margaret didn't tell anyone at work what we were doing. She told me to focus on my job and keep quiet. "The best revenge," she said, "is truth. We'll let that do the talking." That night, as I drove home, I realized something had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of Ethan anymore. I was angry and ready to make sure he finally faced the consequences of everything he'd done. Margaret was serious about not letting Ethan walk away untouched. A few days after our first meeting, she introduced me to a legal investigator named Daniel Reby. He was calm, professional, and had the kind of quiet confidence that made you trust him right away. Margaret told me he had helped her company in the past when she suspected fraud in a supplier's account. "He knows how to find what others try to hide," she said. Daniel met me in her office and started by asking simple questions: dates, names, bank transfers, anything that connected Ethan's fake business to real people. I gave him everything I had: emails, texts, old proposals, even screenshots of messages where Ethan had bragged about landing big investors. Every small detail mattered. Daniel was patient and careful, piecing things together like a puzzle. For the next few weeks, we worked quietly. Nobody else at work knew what was happening. Margaret made sure of that. She didn't want rumors or attention. She wanted results. While Daniel handled the legal side, Margaret reached out to her business contacts. She spoke with a few people who had worked with Ethan or considered investing in him. She never mentioned my name, but she made it clear they needed to be careful. Bit by bit, Ethan's image started to fall apart. The same people who once praised him began pulling away. His business deals stalled, clients canceled projects, and word spread that something about his company didn't add up. Margaret never took credit, and I never said a word. Watching it unfold was strange. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction, just a deep sense of justice finally taking shape. At the same time, I focused on rebuilding my own life at work. I stayed late, double-checked every project, and made sure my performance spoke louder than the gossip that had once surrounded me. Slowly, people began to treat me normally again. They saw that I wasn't part of Ethan's lies. A few even apologized for doubting me. That meant more than they knew. Margaret kept me updated, but she also reminded me to stay grounded. "Revenge doesn't always have to be loud," she told me one evening as we reviewed documents. "Sometimes silence hits harder than shouting." Those words stayed with me. Outside of work, I tried not to think about Ethan, but I couldn't help wondering what he was doing, whether he realized his little empire was collapsing. I didn't call him, didn't text, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fix anything. I had spent my whole life trying to save him from himself. Now, I was finally learning how to let him fall. The investigation was still ongoing, but the cracks were showing fast. The man who once thought he could charm his way through anything was starting to run out of places to hide. And for me, it was the first time I truly understood what strength looked like, not anger or revenge, but quiet, steady power. A few months later, everything Margaret and Daniel had set in motion started to show results. Ethan's company, Parker Builds, was officially under audit. The investigators discovered unpaid taxes, false reports, and fake business claims. It turned out he had taken money from several people besides Margaret, promising returns that never existed. His charm had finally met its limit. The first thing to go was his funding. Investors started withdrawing one by one after learning about the ongoing audit. Then came the frozen accounts. He couldn't access his business funds, and soon after, his personal accounts were also locked. Without money, the fancy lifestyle he had built for himself disappeared fast. His car was repossessed, and the apartment he used to brag about was gone within weeks. I didn't have to ask for updates. People started talking. News spread quietly through the local business community. Margaret never said a word publicly, but everyone knew she had been one of the first to uncover the truth. Still, she stayed calm, focused, and professional. When I asked her once how she felt about it, she just said, "Sometimes karma just needs a little push." One evening, I came home from work and found several missed calls from an unknown number. Then came a voicemail. It was Ethan. His voice cracked as he said, "Lena, I need your help. They're after me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." He kept talking, blaming Margaret, the system, anyone but himself. He said he had just been trying to make something of his life. I listened once, then deleted the message. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I just felt tired. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible for his mess. I had spent too many years trying to save him from consequences he refused to face. Now, I knew it wasn't my job anymore. Over the next few weeks, things only got worse for him. His girlfriend, who had loved showing off his success, left as soon as the money was gone. Old friends stopped answering his calls. Every lie he had told was catching up to him. He went from pretending to be a businessman to being the man no one wanted to deal with. When the official news broke that he had been charged with fraud, I was sitting in the office with Margaret. She handed me the newspaper, the headline clear as day. I waited for some kind of reaction, but she just smiled faintly and said, "Well, there it is." Then she added softly, "Sometimes karma just needs a little push." I nodded, silent. There was no celebration, no satisfaction, just a deep, quiet sense of closure beginning to take shape. Ethan had finally run out of people to fool, and for once, justice didn't feel cruel. It felt fair. Several months passed after Ethan's arrest. Life had started to feel normal again. I was focused on work, and people had finally stopped associating me with his name. My days were quiet, simple, and peaceful, something I hadn't experienced in years. Margaret had moved on to new projects, and we rarely spoke about Ethan anymore. It was like that entire part of my life had finally gone still. One evening, when I came home from work, I found an envelope in my mailbox. My name was written on it in messy handwriting that I recognized instantly. It was from Ethan. For a few seconds, I just stood there staring at it. I didn't know whether to open it or throw it away. Curiosity won, and I went inside, sat at the table, and tore it open. The letter was short. His words were uneven, rushed, like he didn't know what to say or where to start. He wrote that he never meant to hurt me. He said he only wanted to prove himself, to make everyone see that he wasn't a failure. He blamed pressure, bad luck, and desperation. He admitted that he had made mistakes, but he never fully took responsibility for it. Then came the part that made my chest tighten. He wrote that he was facing serious charges and that Margaret's testimony had a big impact. He begged me to talk to her, to ask her to forgive him or help him get a lighter sentence. He ended with, "You're my sister. Please don't turn your back on me now." I sat there for a long time, reading it over and over. For most of my life, those words, "You're my sister," had been enough to make me cave, to make me feel like I owed him something. But this time, they didn't. This time, I felt calm. There was no anger, no sadness. Just understanding. I finally saw him for who he was. Someone who never wanted to change, only to escape the cost of his choices. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and stared at it one last time. Then I fed it into the shredder beside my desk. The sound of the paper tearing apart was oddly freeing. When it was done, I stood there in silence, realizing I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. For years, I had carried his burdens as if they were mine. I had blamed myself for his failures, cried for his mistakes, and sacrificed my peace trying to fix him. But as I watched the shredded pieces fall into the bin, I finally let all of that go. I wasn't his savior anymore. I wasn't his excuse. I was just me, and that was enough. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in a very long time. Time moved forward quietly after Ethan's letter. I focused completely on my work, and slowly, everything I had lost began to return. My confidence, my place in the company, and the respect of the people around me. Each day felt like another small step toward rebuilding the life I wanted, one that wasn't defined by my brother's mistakes, but by my own effort. A few months later, Margaret called me into her office. She had that calm, steady look she always wore when something important was coming. She told me I was being promoted. I remember just sitting there, frozen for a second, unsure if I'd heard her right. After everything that had happened, after the rumors, the embarrassment, and the guilt, hearing her say, "You've earned this," felt almost unreal. From that day forward, things changed. People who once avoided me now asked for my advice. I began managing projects, leading meetings, and even mentoring newer employees. Work didn't just feel like a job anymore. It felt like proof that I had survived, learned, and grown. Margaret became more than a boss to me. She became someone I deeply admired, someone who believed in strength through grace. She never spoke much about her past, but sometimes in quiet moments, she'd drop bits of wisdom that felt personal, almost like she was speaking from her own scars. Over time, she started to feel like the kind of family I always wished I'd had, firm, fair, and kind. Years passed, and one afternoon Margaret called me again. This time, her tone was softer. She told me she was retiring. My heart sank for a moment, but before I could say anything, she smiled and said she had already spoken to the board. They had agreed to name me as the new director of operations. I couldn't find words. All I could do was nod, fighting back the tears that came with disbelief and gratitude. At her farewell dinner, the entire team gathered to celebrate her career. The room was filled with laughter, stories, and a quiet kind of respect that only true leaders earn. Near the end of the evening, Margaret stood up, holding her glass. She looked at me with a proud smile and said, "You turned humiliation into power. Don't ever forget that." Everyone clapped, but in that moment, the noise faded around me. All I could think about was how far I'd come, from standing in that ballroom covered in wine, humiliated and broken, to standing here now, strong and calm, with a future that finally belonged to me. When I got home that night, I took a long look at myself in the mirror. I saw someone who had been through pain, loss, and betrayal, but also someone who had survived all of it. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes and goes, but the kind that stays, the kind you earn. A year after Margaret's retirement, I decided to take a short trip back to my hometown. It had been years since I'd been there, years since I'd even wanted to go. The drive felt strange at first, like flipping through the pages of an old book I wasn't sure I wanted to reread. But something inside me told me it was time. Not for closure from Ethan, but for myself. The town hadn't changed much. The same cracked sidewalks, the same sleepy main street, and the same little diner on the corner with the neon, open sign that never seemed to turn off. I used to go there every Saturday with Ethan when we were kids. Pancakes with too much syrup, the two of us laughing over stupid jokes, back when things were still simple. Before pride, before resentment, before everything fell apart. I don't know why I parked. Maybe part of me wanted to see the place one last time before I drove away for good. As I sat there, my hands on the steering wheel, I saw someone inside, moving behind the counter. He was thinner now, older somehow. His shoulders slumped, his face tired. It took me a moment to recognize him, but then I did. It was Ethan. He didn't see me at first. He was focused on cleaning tables, refilling coffee cups, and handing out plates to a few customers sitting at the counter. For a second, I just watched him quietly. The man who once thought he could control everything, who used charm to get whatever he wanted, now stood there working quietly, earning every dollar the hard way. There was no arrogance left in him, just exhaustion. Then, as if sensing me, he looked up. Our eyes met through the glass. For a long second, neither of us moved. There were no words, no anger, no tears. Just silence. A strange, heavy silence that said everything words never could. I saw something in his eyes, not guilt exactly, but a kind of quiet acceptance. Maybe he finally understood. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I simply gave a small nod, a silent goodbye. Then I started the car, pulled away from the curb, and drove off down the same road we used to ride our bikes on as kids. The sun was setting behind me, and the sky had that soft orange glow that made everything look peaceful. As the town faded in the rearview mirror, I whispered to myself, "You threw a drink in my face once, Ethan. Now, I raise a glass to my freedom." And I meant it. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward him, or sadness, or regret. Just peace. Real deep peace. Because I had finally learned that sometimes, forgiveness isn't about saying the words. It's about walking away and never looking back.